other words to capture modality in a different way. So in this way also capture our actual world as an impossible world. So it was essentially the same thing. So the possibility of capturing modality in another possible world, or also in an impossible world, but not external impossible.
Yeah. So as I just said in reply to so I mean, truth at a world is not the same as truth.
Yeah.
Unless the world in question is the actual world. Okay. So there's one correct logic, and it's the one that holds this logic, this world. So from our perspective, which of course is the right one because it's our world, then these coherent worlds with different logic are just going to be logically impossible worlds. But from their perspective, as it were, it's symmetrical. It's just that truth at our world is truth simpliciter, and truth at their world is only truth at another world.
Class. See, I understand. So more or less, I'm trying to understand because I'm very fascinated for this argument. So a last little thing, maybe it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, but I just try to make question and waiting for better ones. Maybe the problem that we can meet. So so to say, comparing with another, so possible and impossible world, a different type of impossibility. Is there something similar in the case when I compare different logics, but without having a common meta logic, so to say? Is there some analogy? So maybe I want to compare two different logics. I don't know, intuitionistic logic and classical logic, but I don't presuppose to have a common meta logic on the basis of which I can compare them. When you try to propose a lecture or interpretation of possible words or a structure of possible words, is there a similar kind of problem for a logician? If the question makes sense, you could also say, this question has no sense. It makes no sense.
Is there an analogy there? And there certainly is, I think. I think it may be a bit of an analogy, in fact. Let me explain why. A meta logic is in a meta theory, expressed in a meta theory. Yeah. The meta theory, one of the things that does is express the consequence relation of the object theory.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you think about it, when I talked about going from L to L double arrow, you are precisely giving the language the ability to talk about inferences at the ground level, as it were.
Yeah.
Now, you might think about that as a move to the meta level. I mean, you might not, but it would be natural to think of it that way.
Yeah, that was the question.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Now, if you do that, kind of interesting things happen. Because the fact that two logics agree at level 0 does not mean they agree at level 1. That's pretty obvious if you know about sequent calculus, because in Genson's sequent calculus, the sequent calculi with and without cut deliver the same valid inferences, because cut is eliminable, right? So the fact that things have the same consequence relation at a 0 level doesn't mean that they agree the next level up. And what we now know, because of the work of the work of the logic group in Buenos Aires, is that this goes all the way up. Okay, it's not just 0 and 1, but you get the same phenomenon at 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and so on. So you're never going to be able to stamp out differences at the meta level. In principle, it's always possible to go on in different ways as you go up the hierarchy. I don't think that's going to affect my definition, simply because I haven't presupposed anything about how the high levels work. All I'm assuming is that what happens at the high level has got to be coherent. And that's going to be the same as it is in the zero order case. So even if you think this happens, then it doesn't affect my definition. But it's certainly a kind of fascinating phenomenon that things can change things can change. That what happens at any high level does not supervene on the low level. And I think we're still trying to think through the consequences of that. I mean, it starts to look as though you can't identify a logic with a consequence relation or a consequence relation plus a consequence of a consequence relation or blah, 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 all the way up. So some of this work is really fascinating. So that's, I think, where your question takes us. It takes us into this rather fascinating area, although I don't think it sort of detracts from my definition at all.
Do you want to say anything else, Lorenzo?
No. I'm thinking about what Professor Priest is
okay, so
saying.
okay, so thank you very much. We will proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I was.
Okay. So next question is going to be by Pablo Rivas. So you now have the word.
So yeah, can you hear me? Sorry.
I can.
Yeah. So I was initially not going to ask this question because I thought it was just a confusion of mine, but it seemed like I have time. So I was just wondering if you can explain a little bit more how this works for logical pluralists. I mean, you said it's an impossible world is just one in which, well, one of the conditions was that the laws of logic are not those of that are correct in the actual world. So that only means that for logical pluralists we have to make that plural, not just the correct, but all those that are correct. And so we have to define this in terms of logical validity, the sets of logic. So the sets of logics that are in the world. And so it seems like very restrictive for me, but I just wanted to know if that was your intention with applying this to logical pluralism.
Yeah, good. So the construction I gave assumed logical monism. You've got this plurality of extrinsic logics, but you need a way of picking out one of them. And that's what this double arrow does, okay? Now, suppose you're a logical pluralist, then there are going to be a number of different consequence relations. And so you haven't got just one double arrow. You're going to have one for each of the old logics that are in play. So what you've got to do is do essentially the same construction, but instead of having one connective, have a bunch of different connectives, each one representing one of these logics. Okay, so that's the technical move, and that's relatively straightforward. Where it gets a bit messy is this. Logical pluralism gets articulated in many different ways. I think probably the most well-known one is that of Beal and Restle. But there are others and earlier ones. Now, I was certainly assuming that each different logic is truth-preserving at the actual world. Now, depending how you cash out logical pluralism, that might disappear. But that's certainly what I was assuming. So let me say that again. Even if you've got a plurality of logics, if one of them is not truth-preserving the actual world, there's something wrong with it. Okay. That doesn't mean there's uniquely correct logic. It just means that one that doesn't preserve truth is not a very good candidate for one of the correct logics. And if that's the case, then the actual world is going to be coherent. The actual world is coherent if every intrinsic logic, that is, every logic picked out by this double arrow subscript L, is an extrinsic logic, that is, it's truth preserving, and then the rest of the construction goes through. So I am certainly making some assumptions here that an adequate logic of a plurality of logics has to be truth preserving, but modular that assumption, things go through. I gave this talk at Melbourne virtually a few months ago, and Greg Restler was in the audience. So I was curious to know his reaction. And I asked him actually whether he thought that was the right way to go for his notion of logical pluralism. And happily he said yes. So, you know, I was happy with that.
Oh, okay, that seems great. And just for the end, if I just was wondering if you want us to take this with a bit of salt. That you presume that this was a framework for logical monism, but if in addition we have to also think that this is thought for that you're thinking that the correct one here is LP, of course, and this works for best for LP, or it's just like open. Yeah.
Well, look, okay. As a matter of fact, I do think probably that LP is a fragment of the correct logic. I mean, it has obvious shortcomings. I mean, it hasn't really got a conditional operator. So you need to at least add a conditional operator which detaches. How that works is something I've changed my mind on from time to time. But my view is still that LP is a fragment of the correct one true logic. But I'm not going to go to the wall on that. You know, there are variations of logical pluralism I feel very happy with. I've just never seen an argument for that sort of logical pluralism I find very persuasive.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. We're almost on time. So does anyone else want to ask Professor Priest a question? Well, before we see if someone else is going to ask something, I just wanted to ask one last question. I'm not sure if I heard correctly, but did you say at the beginning, almost at the beginning of the talk, that impossibility is not a binary variable, but rather is gradual? Like some things are more impossible than others, or not?
Yeah, I said something like that. What I said was that impossibility comes by degrees, in the sense that some impossible worlds will be fairly tightly constrained by some condition or other. Some will be constrained by weaker conditions, and some will be much more anarchic. That's what I actually said. Okay. Okay.
Perfect. That was all. I just wanted to hear what you meant by that. So thank you. Okay, so I think with this we can give an end to the Q&A and also to the whole session. So once again, thank you very much, Professor Priest, for being with us, for your time and your answers, and thank you all for accompanying us during this section. I just want to remember you all that tomorrow at 11 a.m. in Costa Rica, we'll have a conversation between Tim Williamson and Paul Boghossian regarding their recent joint book, Debating the A Priori, and topics that attain related matters with the philosophy of logic too. And yes, so with this we will close today's afternoon section. And just before ending, just give me a second. I just want to project the last thing. Okay, so yes, there it is. This we're going to have two last talks, but both are going to be offered in Spanish. Keep track of that. They are going to, well, the first one is going to begin in 37 minutes. It is going to be offered by Professor Pedro Solis, and it's entitled Epistemological Naturalism, a Defense Against Popper, but once again, it is going to be offered in Spanish. And after that talk is over, we will finish the day with another talk by Professor Ignacio Salas Hernandez, entitled Naturalismo, Normatividad y Nihilismo en Nietzsche. So that will be all for this section. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.